All right, so it's time to write our code now. So let's look at where do we need to put all of our statements. Remember, all the statements that we're going to be writing, the code that we're going to create, the program that we're writing to solve this problem is always done inside this open and closed curly brace of the main. We call this a method, but for now I don't really know what a method is, so I'm just going to not worry about it, but I do know that it needs a main, and it needs to go in between, all my statements need to go in between the open and closed curly brace. Fantastic. So I'm going to erase these couts because I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to hit a couple enter, and hit the enter key a couple times just to give myself a little bit of space here. So what you're seeing, all of this yellow on the left-hand side, is just Visual Studio letting you know that there's been some changes here, and these are the changes it's seen since the last save. So if you want to save, you can click File and Save All. That seems appropriate, and then everything turns green. So that's what these bars are telling you. So since you opened this since you last saved, these things have now been saved. All right, that's kind of helpful information. All right, so now let's start writing our program. So I'm going to make some comments. Again, it's always good to comment your code. And what a commenting of the code is just giving a clue what's about to follow. What's going to follow here in these next couple of lines? Well, I'm going to get the input in here. So I'm going to work on this first part, and that's the input. So remember, comments are not for the program. It's simply for the users, sorry, someone came in and distracted me. It is for the, comments are for the reader of the code. The compiler, the program itself, is going to ignore them. All right, so now we got to write our code. So I think, how should we open up our program? Well, let's greet our user of our program. So remember, the cout command is how we output data, string, information to our console. So if I do cout, and then cout takes two of these angle brackets, these less than signs, cout, and then in quotations, welcome to my conversion program. I don't know, whatever you want to write. And then always end in a semicolon. These statements always must end in a semicolon, otherwise it doesn't work. So we want to put anything we put inside of these open and close quotation marks is literally, and we use that word literally, the string, literally the data that's going to be written to to the window that our program, our user sees, which we call the console or the terminal window. So let's just go ahead and run this and see if this in fact works. So we're going to go to up here where it says debug. We're going to click on debug. We're going to click on start without debugging, or you can use Control F5 if you prefer. Start debugging will work, but this is better, and we'll learn about what debugging is very soon. So we're just going to start without debugging just to keep things simple for now. Control F5. And what you should see happen is down here in this window, you're going to see what's happening is it says the build. So the program is looking at your code. It's called compile. And there's a little software in there that's looking at all of your code and making sure that everything is correct. You haven't left off the semicolon, for example. You haven't done something you weren't supposed to do. And once the build succeeded, everything worked, then off in my other window, you're going to get your terminal window, which is this big window here, and we'll see our output. Welcome to my conversion program. And then there's some additional data that got thrown in here as well. And then it says press any key to close this window. And so the terminal is waiting for us to, are you finished running this? Otherwise it would just disappear and we wouldn't get an opportunity to see our output. So now I'm going to hit the enter key because I definitely see my cout worked, and I'm going to hit my enter key and start again. So I know that part of my code is working. When you're just learning to program, in fact, even when you're an old timer, I always suggest that you program in just bits and pieces. Just add little bits at a time and then see if it works before you add something else. Because if you write a whole bunch of code and then you test it and it doesn't work, How do you know where to go back from? How do you know where to start in order to fix the problem? Here's an example of what might go wrong. Let's leave out this semicolon. Okay, this is an error. And in fact, if you look down here on this curly brace, you see a little red squiggly line trying to let you know that I'm not very happy with what you've done. Something is not syntactically right. It's like leaving a explanation point or a period off at the end of the sentence. It's not grammatically correct, and the program won't know how to compile or make this work. Let's try it. So I'm going to go back to debug and Control F5, or start without debugging, and when I run this, watch what happens. So I get this error message. There were build errors. Remember, we saw that build down here, and we saw that build when it was successful. Then we got our terminal window. But it's saying, would you like to continue and run the last successful build? No, I want to see what I got for an error. So my last successful build worked. Obviously, I've got something wrong in this current build. So no, I don't want to go to the old build. Let's see what's wrong with this current build. So I'm going to click on no. And you're going to see down here at the bottom is an error message. And sometimes the error messages are easy to understand, and sometimes they're not. And that's part of the challenge, is trying to understand what the program was trying to tell you. So many times there are many statements. There's two statements. You and I both know I only have one problem. I left off the semicolon. But sometimes a single error generates other errors. So instead of trying to solve all of them, I always recommend just look at the very first error and fix that one first and see if that doesn't fix everything. So let's look. It says expected a semicolon. Okay, and if I go further enough across here, it says on line 22. Expected a semicolon on line 22. So I can come back to line 22. Well, there's no semicolon here. That doesn't make sense. Well, because we didn't have a semicolon, the program doesn't, it just knows something's not quite right. So I don't need a semicolon here, but if I look at the line prior, oh, and this is often what you have to do, is this is where things, the program did the best it could up to this point, and then it gave you an error message. So this is where my semicolon goes. So now I feel like I've done it correctly. I'm going to go back and start without programming, debugging I mean, and then let's see what happens. Now all is good. I got the successful build and I got this window returned. So every time you can, as often as you can, test your build to see if it's working. Did it compile is what we call this. Did it execute all the lines successfully, build successfully, and was able to run my program?